So this is the some of the work that we have done on looking at and a blog that we have written on this with Anjali and me, which is on getting data and tables on tender, that what is happening with Indian tendering. We all agree that there is problems in public procurement in India, and if you look at, there is a lot of analysis done, but most of the reasoning is anecdotal. So most common reasoning, if you read a lot of the literature, existing literature in India, including government committee reports, is that it's a lot of corruption and it's a lot of red tape. We uh, do not agree with this. So let us look at the question of red tape. Actually, if you look at most of the regulations and laws governing Indian procurement, they are an order of magnitude smaller than what you get in another countries. Um, our Indian Department of Expenditure Manual for Procurement of Works is around 72,000 words. Federal Acquisition Rules, which also includes goods, not just works, is around 942,000 words. So around 15 times smaller our manual. So if somebody says that our manuals and procurement and rules and regulations cause the problem, actually there are very little restrictions and conditions on how the government can do procurement if we use word counts as a measure of the size and complexity of the laws. The other argument that people make is that India is more corrupt. And we did this rough analysis where we compared uh, Transparency International's corruption index, and we looked at the level of development in GDP per capita. And India is in red here. And if you look, India is actually outside the confidence interval. India is surprisingly not as corrupt as it should be for its level of development. So the question that India is corrupt, these two ideas seem not to be strong reasons. While we don't eliminate this, we try to find another way of looking at this. So we take advantage of a development over the last 5 years, which is the central government has been working hard to bring transparency to public procurement. And the way they bring about this is to create this central website for all public procurement from central governments, departments, public sector undertakings, and soon various states are also being onboarded onto this website, where you get to see your see all government tenders that are open and that have been awarded. There are some restrictions on access to tenders that have been awarded, but we try to make the best use of this website and try to come up with some quantitative measure of government tendering. So what did we do? We took data from 10 entities which are the largest procurers from this website for the periods FY19 and FY20. This account for around 50% of the tenders on that website by count and around 80% of the tenders by value. And then for each of these type of entities, we get around 255,000 tenders, and we get around 736 million rupees in value. So we try to understand with these tenders what is happening in them. So the website gives us a very interesting option of looking at all the changes or all the amendments and all the other changes that the tendering authority does before it is awarded. So we look at three features of the tenders. That is, if the entity which is publishing the tender cancels the tender, or it re-tenders, that means it cancels the tender and reissues the same tender again. And the third type of system that we look at is corrigenda. Corrigenda is merely how many times are just amendments to the tender. And corrigenda is interesting because it sets your, as a private entity participating in government procurement, it sets your expectation. Every time a tender is changed, your expectations about the value, whether you even qualify for the tender, may change. So these are the ways we look at to see, okay, what are the frequency at which tenders get changed after they are published. And we find some interesting facts. So that if you look at it, there is a substantial number of tenders which get cancelled, which get retendered, which means that they are published once, but then they are withdrawn and they are published again. So any entity which had actually participated in the bidding process, prepared documents, filed documents, got his finances together, may have even kept production aside in the hopes of winning the tender, has this probability that the tender will get cancelled at any time and then will be retendered. And the numbers vary, but we see something like military engineering services cancel or retender around 16% of their tenders. The other things that we looked at is tenders which get cancelled. That means these are published, but they don't get retendered. For procuring entity, after advertising to public and advertising to the private sector that they should come over and participate in the tendering process, decides to cancel the tender. So all the entities which responded to this advertisements for the tenders, got their documents together, just lose the entire effort, man hours, cost, management time that was done to make the documents. And we see these numbers are also substantial. So 26% of NHAI tender, industrial development, highway industrial development corporation tenders, and 11% of NHAI tenders get cancelled in 2019-20. And these numbers are around pre-pandemic numbers, so we really are not getting affected by pandemic cancellations. If you look at Delhi Metro Railway Corporation, they cancel 26% of the tender. So if you see a tender of a Delhi Metro Railway Corporation, there is a 1 in 4 chance it will actually not get done. So does it make sense for a private entity to actually participate in the tendering process? Then we look at something called Corrigenda. The problem is we don't get to see all the Corrigenda, we only get to see snapshots of Corrigenda as on a given day. This was around November last year. And on that day, for the top procurements, these were the level of Corrigenda we had. And this is actually an underestimation, because as more and more tenders come into grow older, we see almost for some places like Airports Authority and NHAI, the numbers go up to close to 100%. If you can see here for the Industrial Development Corporation, it's already at 79% changes. So Corrigenda, again, what we find is most of the Corrigenda changes the date. So we see that tenders originally start with a date of say maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks to participate. Parties may get together, do the hard work of organizing tender documents, keeping their supply chain ready to actually participate in the tender. But we keep seeing constant changes in the tender dates. Apart from changes in tender dates, there are non-significant number of changes in which the technical specifications of the goods being procured or the services being procured, or the specifications of the bidder that can act, of the parties who can actually bid, keep getting changed. And that is, of course, brings an uncertainty to this. And if you add up all the three, you see there is almost a certainty that none of the tenders are a certainty. Just to kind of give you a kind of a experience of a tender, we just took the timelines of one tender which was published by the National Highway Authorities in 2018 as a story of what happens with a tender. This is an especially bad case, so this is not it's not the average case in NHAI, but we chose this because it is not an especially rare case. This is bad, but I would say it's in the bottom quartile, but not in the bottom 10% or 1% of NHAI tenders. So the original tender was published in December 2018, and the original bidding period was that 23rd January they would open the tenders, and the last day, 24th, they would open the tenders, and 23rd January 2019 was the day you had to finish the tenders. One day after they NHAI publishes the tenders, this is 10th December, it is publishing the tender. On 11th December, NHAI issues a set of corrigenda, and it changes the details about new sector of procurement. It uploads new documents for preparing for for how the road will be done. So this tender is for a standard Indian tender of turning a 2-lane highway into a 4-lane highway. And just place yourself in the position of a construction company which is interested in bidding for this project. 21st January, which is 2 days before the original submission date, NHAI comes and says that no, we will not take this 23rd January as the deadline. We'll move it to 12th February as the deadline. Well and fine, and then maybe you wait till, okay, it's just another less than 1 month, three weeks of time you can wait. On 11th February, which is one day again before the second revised date, we again change the tender date for by another 7 days to 19th February. Then after changing it to 19th February, on 13th February, NHAI publishes another corrigenda. And this time, the corrigendum documents are revised tender documents, final proposal, letter. So this is nearly 2 months after the tender has been originally published. Fundamental changes about the tender documents, about the financial proposals are being changed by NHAI. And imagine if you have already, if you're a company and has done the hard work of actually organizing your documents and systems to participate for this tender, suddenly you have a huge sunk cost problem. You have spent months preparing for this tender and suddenly documents have been changed and you have only 7 days to submit. Then on 14th February, NHAI publishes another corrigenda. This time it actually clarifies questions which bidders had probably asked. Imagine this is a problem because bidders would have asked questions right from 11th December or 12th December, and the original tender opening date was 24th January, but 3 weeks after the original opening date, NHAI finally gets around to answering questions of the bidders. And 18th January, which is one day before the final of the new revised date of 19th January, it extends the deadline for a third time to move it to 25th January of 2019. Between 25th January, between 22nd February of 2019 and 19th October of 2020, NHAI changes the deadline for this tender 25 times. And now the bid period, which originally started at 44 days, has turned to 708 days. On 2nd November, when we extracted the data, this tender was not closed and it was still open. And, the days were counting. This is an example of an experience that a private organization has a high chance of facing if it was to participate in a government procurement process. The other thing that we see is, as a result of this system, is just we looked at NHAI, is the number of active tenders it has and the number of tenders it has awarded. So as of today, NHAI has around 274 tenders open, and this is roughly the same number of tenders it publishes around a year or so. But if you look in 2019, which is pre-pandemic year, the total number of tenders that NHAI awarded was only 14. So of the 274 tenders that are open this year in NHAI, if you are a private company and you take up, there's a 5% chance you will actually get a tender which will close and come to some fruition. This level of uncertainty is just even before any contract has been signed, any problems that come with the reality of executing a project in India comes to face you. It is a set of disruptions and lack of planning that is even before any of the actual work of building the highway, payment delays, which sadly we don't have a system of measuring, can come in. So we think that this website provides us with a nice opportunity to measure this uncertainty of tenders. We think this is a better explanation for the problems of procurement in India. We have some hypotheses as to why this is happening, Anjali, and I think that it is not so much corruption, it is not so much about red tape, it is actually the lack of red tape, that there is very little planning that is done before a tender document is published. And most of the time, after publishing the tender document, there are frequent changes by the authority which actually wants to purchase something from the private sector. What are the next steps that we are trying to do? There is a similar website in the US, which is called the Federal Acquisition website, which does a similar work where US government documents are published. And while it is not a fair comparison that between US and India, the state capacities are different, the role of federal government is different, but we are trying to now look at least for some standardized contracts like highway development contracts, which we also get in the US to compare how many times it happens. So one of the interesting things, initial reporting that we have been doing, is that we found that while NHAI has 274 tenders open today. The US government Federal Highways Authority has less than 4 tenders that are open at this moment of time. And out of the 4 tenders, we found only 2 tenders in which deadlines had been changed. That gives you an interesting comparison between what is happening in the US and in India in terms of standardizing. These tenders are also highway maintenance and repair tenders, similar to what NHAI is doing in. There are some challenges to this because the data in the website run by the government of India has some weird features by which once a tender gets published, once the tender gets awarded, it is withdrawn from the public notice. So while it is irrelevant to bidders, but for researchers, if we could get access to the background database on which the government website is running, we would be able to do much better analysis. And we think the analysis of the types of changes can give insight to government as to what is going wrong in public procurement in India. Bhargavi, I'm done.
Thanks, Shubho. May I now request Dr. Santosh Mathew to, give us his inputs, comments on this work. And as many of you all know, Dr. Santosh Mathew has worked with the government for more than 30 years. During his time at the government, he's worked with the government of Bihar and with the Ministry of Rural Development at the center. And Dr. Mathew has he's been fighting in the trenches, right? So he has the most, I would say, realistic perspective of what is going on with public procurement and why do we believe that there are so many delays and bottlenecks in the process. Dr. Mathew, if you could just switch on your video, that will be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me start by thanking both Shubho and Anjali for literally, lifting the cloud in a very important aspect of public procurement, which was not really understood, both in the area of scholarship and in the area of practice. And I think in itself, it's an important contribution because it draws attention to an anomaly which requires serious attention. For example, that of the 26,000 government procuring organizations, 80% by value is restricted to 11. That's a very exciting result in itself, because for government, particularly at the level of the political leadership, which lays so much store in terms of the ease of doing business, that this is a problem that can be sorted out if they can crack just 11 organizations, is itself a very important finding. Number two, I think the significant contribution that you make is what is the direction, what are some of the directions in which effort needs to be put in to be able to reform? That's something as observable as this. The problem with the Indian state is that, everybody has a story to tell. There are enough anecdotes going around. But much of what the sort of scholarship around the Indian state is about the state. It's from the outside. And there is so much little that we know in terms of rigorous scholarship of what's happening down in the trenches. I mean, just to say that, there is this Mercedes-Benz car, which is white and, it is very smooth, is fine. But what's making it what it is, what is reproducing the incapacities, and where there is high capacity, what are the drivers of that high capacity? There's so little scholarship about it, and in that sense, you're making an important contribution. But, frankly, this what I heard you say and what I read in the blog, it leaves me wanting for more. They often say that's the best time to leave a reader, is to just leave them when you've stoked the fire, but you leave them. But I really wish, or I would like to urge you, really to be able to answer this question that's in the back of my mind when I go at this, both from a person who is a deeply interested person in reforming the state. But why is this happening? You know, ये क्यों हो रहा है? This and that brings us to the question of research methods. So this kind of a method, despite you having taken pains to do table 4, which is an example of frequent changes to a tender, and it's very insightful, and thank you for doing that, it still leaves me with a question, kyun ho raha hai? Of course, you have alluded to the possibility that it is not corruption. I'm quite relieved to hear that, but it is more in terms of, you don't say what it is, but probably you are saying that it is because there is a competency problem, there is a due diligence problem, inadequate supervision problem. We don't know what it is. I mean, little more insight, and this would go in the form of, just some sort of little bit of, field work. And in days of Corona, even phone calls would be rather insightful to ask both parties informally as to, this is a finding, boss, ho kya raha hai? I mean, why do you think this? I mean, and you will get hypothesis from both sides of the divide. People who put in submissions and people who produce these invitation notice for inviting tenders. And that, I think, even if it is not as rigorous as you would like it to be, and even if this is not your normal sort of methodological inclination, I think producing some hypothesis around that would be of great value. I have a few small points, but Bhargavi, just keep me on track. I don't want, in terms of timing. How much more time do I have?
So you have 5 minutes, 53 seconds more.
Excellent. I'm so relieved to hear that you're keeping that. Thanks. The other big statement, the other statement that I want to make is that what could be pointers, even with the insight that you have, what could be the pointers? Could we speculate, not perhaps as part of the paper, but as people who reflect on this? What could be the pointers for government to reform this? Of course, you can say study this more, but I have a feeling, and my sense is that government will actually be open to sharing more information with you because of what, I mean, I'm sure government is desperate for the analysis. The Honorable Minister in charge of the department has been famous in, it's gone viral, his video, what the remarks he gave when he was inaugurating the new building of the National Highway Authority. So there is, I think, an appetite and a hunger for change. And we would do well to explore their willingness to share more data with you so that more insights like this could be drawn. Also, I think government has, to some effect, been able to show that comparisons is a good sort of driver for change, and therefore, is it possible to draw some comparisons between states, for example, or to produce a pecking order between the 26,000 government procurement organizations in terms of some criteria, some sort of an index that you can produce with weights? Of course, data is, and availability of data is going to be key. Is it possible to provide some sort of an index which can move over time? I'd like you to reflect on whether that would be something that's actually feasible. So having made these broad remarks, I want to get into some little specifics. And that is to do with, the opening line, and I'm going to read this. One source of low state capacity in India lies in the ability of the state to contract with private persons. The contracting process starts with procurement. Contracting and procurement. From a jurisprudence sort of from a law perspective, I can understand the contracting thing, but a person who has worked inside government, this is not the way we use terms, or rather we understand terms. Because for us, procurement is the act, procurement is the whole process, and contracting is the contract we enter into. Now, here's an English language play and how different disciplines understand this. I just like you to reflect on this. For me, it's a little confusing. Now I'm getting into the nitty-gritties of the drafting of the thing. So pardon me, that's not the expectation. The second thing that is this point where you say, where is that? Yeah. So this is coriander or frequent part, and is a little confusing me. It says that our analysis in table 2 relied on tenders that were not active. However, on the CPPP website, coriander details are only available for tenders that are currently active. So I don't know. I've tried, but I'm not able to get my head around this. I mean, am I reading it wrongly? Is there a contradiction? So, that sort of, if that's the case, how do you calculate table 2 is really my obvious question. Then the other is that you talk in terms of the preponderance of changes being around change of date. It would be useful to ask ourselves the question, is a change in date a change in date only? Or is a change in date being driven by other changes, and therefore you need to give time for people to respond, and that's what's driving the date? That sort of a link would be useful to understand. And of course, I mean, this sort of a methodology, how much of it will how much more can you do without doing some case study work? I really would not know, and you would know better. The other is that for me, really, the power of this would come when you're able to combine this observation that you have with the other part of it. You may say it's out of scope, it's out of syllabus, as it were, as a school child will tell you when confronting an exam, but it'd be really useful to juxtapose the two together. And that is the link between payment delays. Now, is it that these orgs which do more changes in the tender, do they also have more delays in in payments? Now, for that, of course, you'll have to unearth payment delay sort of data, and I'm not so sure how easy it is. But if you are able to, just looking at the relationships, or even just pure co-occurrence without attributing causality, would be an interesting sort of line of inquiry I'd urge you to look at. The other is that, and this is a very key statement, is the problem of, this is the section on the problem of tender modification. In the first paragraph, you you end by saying the price at which engagement with the government could be profitable. So what you're really alluding to is that this sort of incapacity, or this consequence of these changes, actually increases the cost even to government and therefore the taxpayer. Now, is that some sort of a comparison possible? I'm not saying that it will be possible to estimate what is the price of doing this. Of course, if we can do this through some econometric method, I mean, it'll be just fabulous, but I'm not so sure if it's possible. But is some comparison possible between states, between countries, for items of same specification, roads, for example? For the same kinds of roads, is it possible to find out what is the comparable cost in one country over the other? Of course, using the exchange rate with purchasing power parity and all those things, there are methodological issues but then exploring whether that's sort of a inter-country, or in India is also a theater, is a crucible because of the different states you have. Is it possible to make some interstate comparisons while thinking of inter-country comparisons? Is another useful way to think about. Yeah, I am done. I am done. But let me just thank you by saying thank you for opening our eyes. Thank you for pointing us in this direction. Thank you for making us understand that this line of inquiry is something that can be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Matthew. Okay, Shubho, may I just collect questions from the audience and then maybe you could take about 3 or 4 minutes to respond? Okay. If anybody has questions, I can see Rick has put up a question. Shubho, if you could just have a look at that in the chat box. If anybody else has questions, please feel free to raise them right away. Okay. Anybody? If you like, you could type it in the chat box and maybe Shubho can take them on right now or maybe even respond to you in offline. Okay. Shubho, we're good to go. You 3 minutes? Is 3 minutes?
Sure.
Okay?
Thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks.
So Dr. Matthew, we are trying to do the next steps, which is some of these things that you are pointed out. We are trying to get them in the next steps. We are trying to, we'll certainly go back to government with a more polished analysis to try to get them to give us some of the older CPP data. This is not confidential. These are tenders which have already been awarded. If we can get this in a database, actually, we think the analysis of some of the corrigenda will give us an understanding of what is going wrong, and we will look at getting some manpower to look at analyzing these documents and pushing for that, and we will move to answer some of these questions. I have some my anecdotal reasoning as why some of these things are going wrong. One of the things I have seen that other jurisdictions are doing is spending money on procurement. It seems that the government doesn't spend much money on procurement. The US, for example, has a budget for procurement for an estimated amount of procurement, which will be around 2 to 3% of the money of the procurement for various activities like market research, contacting vendors, doing meetings to actually finalize the specifications. As Rick was pointing out, we have certain situations where the specifications published are actually not even available in the country. They are too old because the government organization republished a tender from 2010 on computer technology. You can't buy a computer in 2010 which is still available again in 2020. So there is this lack of investment in preparing for a tender, and also lack of specialization. Both in the UK and the US, there is a separate cadre of people like the FA. There is a cadre of people called procurement managers. And it's their job to run tenders, to run procurement, to run the contracting through all the stage, and they are frozen in business areas. So you become a procurement manager for submarines, you procure submarines, you go from small submarines to big submarines. You become a procurement manager for highways, you buy small highways and you get large highways. You go up and your promotion is based on the size of procurement you have done, and then you don't get procurements which are more than 3x than the largest procurement you have done in the past. So there is a huge system that has been built around the bureaucracy to support the decision makers. The decision will still be taken by some general bureaucrat, but he is supported by procurement managers who understand the field, who have relationships with the companies, who know that if I were to bring this tender out, you would get these things. And what is happening is the learning is not staying in the institution, they're getting transferred out. But which is surprising, because we had thought of entities like NHAI would be freezing that expertise instead of Ministry of Road Transport, where IAS officers will come and go. NHAI should build that system, but we are not getting that. On the issue of trends, we can see some of the interesting things over the older data, because the website is 5 years old, is a surprising lack of improvement.
Just a heads up, your time is up. So if you could just...
Yeah, just I'll wrap up with this, that there's a surprising lack of improvement, and we will probably go back and start looking at some of these issues and comparing with other countries, and maybe doing an analysis of these other issues. We have stayed back from making the kind of claims about why this is happening, because we want to win our legitimacy in the eyes of people, that look, we have done the hard work, and then if you give us time, resource, then we can actually do this work of the next level. First is what is going wrong, which is relatively far easier than why it is going wrong, and we just want to be humble and not do it in right now. Yeah, Bhargavi, I'm done.
Thanks, Shubho. Yeah, so I just want to add to the point about whether we should jump to figuring out why something is going wrong. And I completely agree, right? I mean, even measuring payment delays is turning out to be a challenge, although we all anecdotally know that this is happening. And unless we begin with identifying the scale of the problem, maybe, figuring out bottlenecks is a harder exercise. So, but definitely it's a more ideal goal to achieve, to aspire to achieve. So thank you both for your time.